them carried weapons, and they came by the speedboats.
Refugee boats in international waters have the right to freedom of navigation.
They were paid $32,000 American.
You refuse to deny that you were involved in the payment of that.
Senator, we're neither confirming or denying it. We're just simply not commenting on it.
டீசலும் கம்மியாக தான் அடிச்சிருந்தவங்க, அதுக்கேற்ற மாதிரி டீசலும் அடிக்கலை. அப்போ நாங்கள் போய் கொண்டிருக்க டீசல் முடிஞ்சிருச்சு, வண்டியில் நடு இதில் நிற்கிறோம்.
Terlepas dan arusnya bawa ke luar. Dan semua orang di atas 60 lebih orang. Dan ibu-ibu hamil dan bayi yang ada di dalam juga.
ஒன்று இல்லையென்று சொன்னால் அவங்க எடுத்துக்கொண்டு போய் எங்களை ஒரு விசாரணை பண்ண இல்லையா? என்னத்துக்கு வந்த நீங்கள் உங்களுக்கு நாட்டில் என்ன பிரச்சனை எதுவும் கேட்க.
Australia's refugee policy is under pressure. In October 2017, Australia closed its detention camp on Manus Island after years of controversy.
Australia's immigration detention camp, which houses nearly 800 men, will close down.
Day by day, what little is left of the now closed camp is being removed.
But has this focus on Manus Island missed a bigger story? From October 2014 to October 2016, only one refugee was sent to Manus Island. So what happened to all the other asylum seekers?
Under my command, anyone who tries to enter Australia illegally will be stopped and turned back to where they departed from.
In 2013, the Australian government launched Operation Sovereign Borders, a military-led campaign to push back refugee boats and stop them from claiming asylum in Australia.
Don't waste your money or risk your life. If you come to Australia illegally by boat, you will be detected, intercepted and turned back.
My job is to stop boats arriving illegally in Australia. Do not believe the lies of people smugglers. People smugglers will tell you anything to take your money. Don't believe their lies.
But are Australian officials telling the truth? Who's paying the people smugglers? We went to Indonesia to meet refugees whose boat was pushed back by Australia in 2015. They made serious allegations against Operation Sovereign Borders. Their story is so controversial that local authorities tried to stop us filming. We recorded the interviews inside a van to avoid detection. They claim that the Australian Navy violently boarded their ship and bribed the people smugglers to take the refugees back.
Yeah, they have guns and strongly they blocked the door. One of the Navy officer and Mr. Milliot names, okay, he came and meet with our head crews inside the kitchen behind our boat and talk with the crews. We just saw to our captain receive from the money, Mr. Agus, and put his pocket inside the white color envelope. So we just saw that for a minute. When we saw that, the other soldier tried to put us inside the cabin.
Amnesty International spoke to the crew of the refugee boat, who were in prison in Indonesia for people smuggling. They made the same allegation against Australian officials.
So the crew members told me that the Australian officials offered to pay them money. They were paid $32,000 American.
The Australian Senate launched an inquiry into these allegations.
Senator Hanson-Young Are you in a position to rule out, to deny the allegation that $32,000 American was paid to the crew of a vessel on its way to New Zealand or otherwise and returned to Indonesia under the authority of Operation Sovereign Borders?
Well, Senator, because it goes to the heart of operational activity and the range of engagements that we have within the operational framework, I'm not able to answer that question.
But what we have is 65 odd people arriving on an island in Indonesia in 2 Australian provided vessels with $32,000 of American money that they've just magically got in the middle of the high seas. I mean...
Senator, we have no comment on that at all.
But it's worse than no comment. You refuse to deny that you were involved in the payment of that.
Senator, we're neither confirming or denying it. We're just simply not commenting on it.
While I was on Rote Island, I also interviewed the Indonesian police in whose custody the crew was being held at that time in August 2015. And the police told me that when they found the crew, they found this $32,000 on them. When I asked, do you have this money that you found on them still? And he said yes. And I said, do you mind showing it to me? He said, no problem. And he was very keen to show me the money. And it was quite a surprising, kind of shocking moment when he pulled this, thousands of dollars out of a safe and laid them out on the table and said, well, here you go.
Look, the Australian government has put a lot of effort into demonising, people smugglers, even though people smugglers are very often the only resort, that someone who is fleeing persecution has to be able to get to Australia, particularly because Australia has stopped any other way that people, can get here. It is the only way. And it is the height of hypocrisy for the government to talk about people smugglers in those terms when it is quite happy itself to traffic asylum seekers. In this case of this particular boat, in spite of talking about people smugglers being the lowest of the low, it was more than happy to pay some money to ensure that crew only went back to Indonesia.
Do not believe the lies of people smugglers. These criminals will steal your money and place your life and the life of your family at risk for nothing.
If Australian officials are paying bribes to people smugglers, what other laws are being broken to stop the boats? How safe are these turn-back operations for the refugees and their children? In this case, Australian officials confiscated the refugees' 26-metre vessel and put them onto 2 small fishing boats for the trip back to Indonesia. One woman was pregnant.
There was a 1-year-old child, a pregnant woman. Why were they put onto a new vessel as opposed to brought to the safety of land?
Senator, our obligations under the Convention for Safety, the International Convention for Safety of Life at Sea, is to take them to a place of safety.
But and you didn't?
We did that.
A boat?
Sorry?
Where did you take them?
We provided them with the means, with safe means, to be able to return to their country of departure.
So you didn't take them to somewhere safe, you put them on a boat?
Our actions were consistent with those obligations.
So you didn't have any concerns with putting a pregnant woman and a 1-year-old child onto a boat in the middle of the ocean when you described the weather conditions as rough?
நாங்கள் என்னென்னா இப்போ அந்த வண்டியில் வந்து கொண்டு இருந்த வாக்கில் எங்களோட வண்டியில் மாற்றிட்டாங்க. மாற்றினோன்னு அந்த எங்கள் வண்டியில் மாசமாக இருந்தவங்க இருந்தாங்க, குழந்தை பிள்ளைங்க எல்லாமே இருந்தவங்க. அதில் சாப்பாடு ஒன்றுமே இல்லை. ஒரு தண்ணி போத்தல், ஒரு பிஸ்கெட் அப்படி தான் வச்சுருந்தவங்க. பிள்ளைகளுக்கு சாப்பாடும் காணாது. அப்போ எல்லாம் சண்டை போட்டுக்கிட்டு இருந்தவங்க திரும்பி நம்ம போவோம் அப்படின்னு சொல்லி போவோன்ட்டு சொல்ல, அப்போ நாங்களாம் சொல்லிவிட்டோம், எங்களை கொண்டு எங்கேயாச்சும் ஒரு கரையில் கொஞ்சம் ஒதுக்குங்க, இது போக முடியாது. இந்த வண்டியால் அவங்க கொடுத்த வண்டியில் டீசலும் இல்லை, சாப்பாடு இல்லை, டாய்லெட் வசதி ஒன்றுமே இல்லை. அப்போ எங்களால் போக முடியாது. மாசமாக இருக்கிற ஒரு அக்கா வேறு இருந்தவா, அவளுக்கு டாய்லெட் வேறு வந்துருச்சு, ஒன்றும் பண்ண முடியாது. அவ்வளோ பொடியனாக்கள்லாம் இருக்கிறாங்க. அப்போ அவங்க கஷ்டப்பட்டு அந்த அண்ணன் வந்து கீழே கூட்டிகிட்டு போய் தான் அவங்களே டாய்லெட் போகணுன்னவங்க.
இவன் வந்து ப்ரெக்னெண்ட்டாக இருந்தவங்க. அப்போ அது வரைக்கும் சாப்பாடு பிரச்சனை, தண்ணி பிரச்சனை, மற்றபடி 2 கட்டம் டாய்லெட் இருக்க இடம் இல்லாமல் ரொம்ப கஷ்டப்பட்டு நான் ஒரு பொட்டி ஒன்றை கொண்டு போய் வச்சு அது பெட்ஷீட்டை பிடிச்சி இருந்து அழுதவன் ஏழாவது அழுக கூட கஷ்டப்பட்டு துடைச்சு அப்படி சீரடைஞ்சு ஏன்னு இப்படி ஆஸ்திரேலியா செய்வது சத்தியமா தெரியல. நாங்கள் என்ன பாவம் செய்யணும். அதுக்கு பிறகு அங்கே விட்டுட்டு போயிட்டாங்க. போன பிறகு எங்களை இந்த பக்கம் வரக்கூடாது, போய் சாகக்கூடாது.
We went to find the boats that the refugees were moved onto by the Australians, the Jasmine and the Cannock. These small boats were much less seaworthy than their original ship. The Jasmine was crammed with 32 refugees and 3 crew members. The Australian Navy had not given the refugees enough fuel to get back to Indonesia, and the Jasmine's engine spluttered to a halt in the middle of the ocean.
டீசலும் கம்மியாக தான் அடிச்சிருந்தவங்க, அதுக்கேற்ற மாதிரி டீசலும் அடிக்கலை. அப்போ நாங்கள் போய் கொண்டிருக்க டீசல் முடிஞ்சிருச்சு, வண்டியில் நடு இதில் நிற்கிறோம்.
அவங்க அதில் இருக்கிறவங்க எல்லாம் 5 இதெல்லாம் ஆடி எல்லாரும் செத்துருவோன்னு நினைச்சோம். நாட்டில் தான் நிம்மதி இல்லை, இங்கே வந்தாலும் எல்லாரும் செத்துட்டு தானே இருக்கோம். இங்கேயும் பிரச்சனை. அப்போ
That's what I personally always find so offensive about this. All these brave boys and girls in their ships and their warships, acting against people who are barely staying afloat, who are fleeing, as is their right, who are fleeing places of mayhem to get to somewhere safe. That's what they're acting against. It's defiling the name of this country in a real sense.
It is the policy and practice of the Australian government to intercept any vessel that is seeking to illegally enter Australia and safely remove it beyond our waters.
This is the moment when the refugees had to abandon the Jasmine after it ran out of fuel in the middle of the high seas. Despite this evidence, the commander of Operation Sovereign Borders, Major General Bottrell, told the Senate inquiry that this was a safe return.
What is your classification of safe return?
Sorry, Senator, I don't quite understand
Well,
your question.
you've said that they safely arrived back in Indonesia. If there had to be a mid-sea transfer between these two boats without any Australian officers or officials to assist, does that fit into your definition of safe return? Is that within your conditions of safe return?
Senator, we provided the individuals with the means to safely return, and the officers that were involved are comfortable, are confident, and I am confident, based on the directions and discussions and decisions that were involved in the return of those people to Indonesia, that they would return safely to Indonesia. Whether they change their approach or change a decision is beyond our control. We provided them with the means to be able to return safely. They have returned safely to Indonesia.
We also found the second refugee boat, the Cannock. The refugees clambered on board, making it dangerously overcrowded. The crew only had limited navigation equipment. It was a matter of time before disaster struck. The hull of the Cannock shows clear signs of what was coming next for the refugees on their ill-fated odyssey. We went to see where the refugees' journey finally came to a dramatic halt. The Cannock crashed into a reef off this island. Local fishermen on the beach saw this drama unfolding and intervened to save the refugees.
Ada kapal yang jaraknya masih setengah kilo dari depan ini. Tetapi setelah saya duduk, kapal itu semakin merapat ke sini. Jadi 10 menit kemudian dia tersangkut di depan itu. Setelah dia tersangkut, saya berpikir bahwa pasti ini ada orang, ya ada orang di atas.
எல்லாம் எடுத்து அவங்களெல்லாம் பிடிச்சி இழுக்க எல்லாம் விட்டுட்டு ஓடிட்டாங்க தப்பி ஓட்டிமா. அதுக்கப்புறம் நாங்கள் ஒவ்வொருத்தரா என்ன ஒன்றும் செய்யலாதானே நீந்த தெரிஞ்சவங்க போய் அந்த ரொட்டை சனத்தை கூட்டிட்டு
kapal yang kandas ada di depan di muka batu ini, dan satu di bawah arus ke belakang batu sana. Pada saat itu kapal yang kandas cuma satu dan satu terlepas dan arusnya bawa ke luar. Jadi semua orang di atas 60 lebih orang. Dan ibu-ibu hamil dan bayi yang ada di dalam juga.
அப்போ நாங்கள் என்ன செஞ்சினாங்க சரின்னு சொல்லி சின்ன சின்ன ஒரு படகெல்லாம் வந்துச்சு எங்களை பார்க்குறதுக்கு. அப்போ அதில் கொஞ்சம் பேராக போனவங்க பொடிய நாக்கெல்லாம் குதிச்சு நீந்தி முன்னாடி போனவங்க. நாங்கள் போய் யாரையாச்சும் உதவிக்கு கூட்டிகிட்டு வர்றோம் அப்படின்னு சொல்லி பொடிய நாக்கெல்லாம் நீந்தி போனவங்க. போய் அங்கேருந்து சின்ன அந்த மீன் பிடிக்கிற படகெல்லாம் வர நானும் மகன் அப்புறம் இன்னொரு ஃபேமிலி அதில் ஏறி உட்கார அது அப்படியே கவுந்து நாங்கள் தண்ணியில் இருந்து மகன் தண்ணியெல்லாம் உப்பு தண்ணியை குடிச்சு நான் உப்பு தண்ணியெல்லாம் குடிச்சு ரொம்ப கஷ்டப்பட்டு அப்புறம் அங்கே உள்ள தீவில் ஒரு ஆம்பளை தான் வந்து என்ன பிடிச்சி கரை ஓரம் அங்கே வரைக்கும் கொண்டு போனவங்க.
Jadi pas saat itu warga menolong mereka dan mereka semua datang di tempat yang aman dan mereka bawa ke rumah saya dan dikasih jamin di sana, suruh mereka makan, mandi, dan tetangga-tetangga juga menolong mereka lewat makanan dan pakaian untuk menyumbang mereka.
போய் அங்கே போய் இறங்கினோன்னே விடிய எங்களை வந்து நைட்டோட எங்களை கூட்டிகிட்டு போயிட்டாங்க. போலீஸ் வந்து ஒரு அவங்களோட போலீஸ் தீவுக்கு கூட்டிகிட்டு போனோன்னே அங்கே போய் அடுத்த நாள் பார்த்தா எங்களை கேப்டன் ஆக்கெல்லாம் காணோம், எல்லாம் ஓடிட்டாங்க. அடுத்த நாள் பிடிச்சி கூட்டிகிட்டு வர அவங்க பேக்கில் காசெல்லாம் இருந்துச்சு. டாலர் என்ன டாலர்னு தெரியல, டாலரா அமெரிக்கா டாலர்னு தெரியல, அதில் காசெல்லாம் இருந்துச்சு.
ஆஸ்திரேலியா இந்த காசை கொடுத்து அனுப்பாமல் இருந்திருந்தால் நாங்கள் இன்றைக்கு இந்த இப்படி எல்லாம் வந்து சீரழிய வேண்டிய அவசியம் இல்லை. ஒன்று செத்துருப்போம், இல்லை ஏதோ ஒன்று நல்லது நடந்திருக்கு மக்களுக்கு. இது ஒன்றும் இல்லையா, அவனுக்கு லஞ்சத்தை கொடுத்து அவங்கள தூக்கி ஜெயிலில் போட்டாச்சு, எங்களை தூக்கி தான் ஜெயில் தான் என்ன அதிலே இருக்கிற ஒன்று இல்லையென்று சொன்னால் அவங்க எடுத்துக்கொண்டு போய் எங்களை ஒரு விசாரணை பண்ண இல்லையான்னு என்னத்துக்கு வந்த நீங்கள் உங்களுக்கு நாட்டில் என்ன பிரச்சனை எதையும் கேட்கல.
I refute quite strongly any suggestion that the men and women of the Australian Border Force or the Australian Defence Force that were involved in any of these activities would take any action that would knowingly or would knowingly put any of the lives of any of these people in harm's way.
The Australian government released this short statement on the case. They acknowledged that the refugees were in fact trying to reach New Zealand. There was no objection to Australia's actions from New Zealand's centre-right Prime Minister at that time, John Key. Not everyone agreed with John Key. We met opposition politicians in Auckland from Labour and the Greens. They were concerned about Australia stopping refugees claiming asylum in New Zealand.
The people smugglers were paid by the Australian government. We know, for example, that those asylum seekers were put onto substandard boats, and there was no thought given to what would happen to them once they were in the open sea. Those sorts of tactics are despicable. By New Zealand not stepping up and saying to Australia that this is unacceptable, it's illegal, international practice is a lot more humane than what Australia has proven to be doing. Because we're not doing that, then we are as guilty as Australia is. And we should actually be stepping up and taking those refugees, those asylum seekers, and processing them here.
I don't see why we can't just sit down right now, that our leader can't sit down right now and ask serious questions and have a look how we can immediately take action and see if we can't welcome these refugees right here.
It's valid to look at this case as a particular, as an exception, and I support the idea that has been pushed by Amnesty and others for a royal commission into the entire way in which refugees and asylum seekers are coming down through that route, wanting to get to Australia and ostensibly onto New Zealand as well.
Despite this concern from opposition MPs, the refugees were never welcomed to New Zealand. Stuck in limbo in this Indonesian detention camp, many succumbed to pressure and went elsewhere. But this family remained, hoping that elections in New Zealand might bring them a second chance. In October 2017, a centre-left Labour leader took power in New Zealand, supported by the Green Party.
At only 37, Ardern is the second youngest Prime Minister in New Zealand's history.
We begin tonight with the incoming Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, who has unveiled the team that will help her run the country. A mix of ministers from Labour, New Zealand First and the Greens, of course.
Kajuran and Nadia were excited by the result. They wrote to the new government, asking for asylum for their growing family. Now they are in power in New Zealand, will Labour and the Greens act on their earlier concerns about Australia's Stop the Boats policy?
Look, there has been ongoing attempts over the years, both to reach Australia, and also there have always been rumoured attempts of going beyond that. It is unacceptable to have people manipulate those in vulnerable situations by acting as smugglers and organising shipments of people. They must be stopped. New Zealand has played a role in trying to stop them. We have been involved for a number of years as a country working alongside Australia in trying to stop people at the source from risking their lives and trying to make that journey, and we will continue to do so.
Kajuran's family have now received this response from New Zealand's Immigration Department.
While I understand that you are currently in a difficult situation, there are many other people with similar circumstances, or who would simply rather live in New Zealand than in their home country. It is not possible to accommodate all such persons with a desire to live in New Zealand.
So it looks like this is the end of the road for Kajuran's family. Stopping the boats, at whatever the cost, appears to be the shared policy of Australia and New Zealand. How many more bribes will be paid and ships wrecked in order to stop refugees reaching safety?